Hi friends and readers! For this week's reading vlog, we're only going to be reading fantasy books. And then a second layer on top of only reading fantasy books this week is that both of the books I'm reading this week have something to do / have this on the cover, and that is Moths. My little cat is crying. So we're only reading fantasy books this week, and they both have moths on the cover. He's sniffing my lip gloss. Well, thank you. That's right. If I didn't put it in the thumbnail and you haven't looked at the thumbnail, can you guess which two fantasy books have moths on them or have something to do with moths that I'm going to be reading this week? I've been so excited for this week's video in particular because in my head, I had been thinking like, I am so excited to pick up fall books, and to me, fantasy is a great introduction to the fall season. I've already started a little bit with my fall reading, but these two books in particular were like, if I'm reading these, it means we are diving headfirst into the fall mindset, which, come on, everybody's gotta love the fall mindset. These two books have been on my TBR. One of them has been on my TBR for quite some time, and then one of them has just more recently entered my TBR because of everyone having raving reviews about it, and that's the first book that we're gonna be reading this week, which I'll go ahead and show you. And I started reading it last night, but I'm only like 20 or 30 pages into it, so I'm not quite ready to introduce it to you fully, but I will go ahead and let you know that the first book I'm reading this week is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. With it being The Night and the Moth, it most directly says moth in the title, but there are also little baby moths on the title page or cover page. All right, well, I'm on my lunch break. It's like 12:15 right now. I am gonna try to read a lot after work today, and I will talk to you later once I know a little bit more about The Night and the Moth. It is much later in the afternoon, evening since I last talked to you, and I have made it just over 100 pages into The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I'm actually eating this up, devouring, really enjoying it so far. So I want to officially introduce you to what it is without spoiling any more than what you can read on the inside cover, which, by the way, more moths. Oh, so cute. This is by Rachel Gillig, and I have read two other books by Rachel Gillig. If you know her, you probably know that I've read the Shepherd King series, which I rated a 4-star series. The Shepherd King series is One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, which I gave both a 4-star. Now I'm going to preface this by 70% of the story I listened to and probably 30% I read. And I will be honest, I really have not thought of those stories since then, so I don't really know if they were a true 4-star for me, if I just got wrapped up in the hype that all of the other creators mentioning loving that series. I do remember the nightmare quite well, but as far as the rest of the plot, I don't remember much of the series. I wanted to go into that not putting too much expectation on The Night and the Moth, even though every person I hear raves about it. I believe that The Night and the Moth is dark fantasy, gothic fantasy, romantasy, or romantic fantasy, however you want to say it. And I was actually on the search for this book for a long time. I've been going to the local bookstore to see if they would have a copy, and they never did. And then I finally saw it, I believe at a Target, but didn't want to buy it there. But then one of my colleagues gifted this hardback copy for my birthday a few days ago, and that was just the nicest thing ever because it was like she spoiled me. And then funny enough, the bookmark that I'm using, which is butterfly mothy themed, she also gifted me. She's a fellow book reader, so I thought that was just a perfect circle on using that bookmark for the book that she bought me. Now I want to get into a little bit of a summary of what this is about. The Night and the Moth follows our female main character, whose name is Sybil, but she does not really use her name, and that is because she is a diviner, which means 10 years ago or 9 years ago, she was snatched up by this woman who essentially runs the cathedral. The woman goes by Abbess or the Abbess something. She snatched up all of these younger kids or younger girls, and they're calling those younger girls foundling girls, which essentially they found these girls and she is rescuing them by making them a diviner. And how they are diviners is she she basically drowns them in this holy spring water of the cathedral. And now they have this ability to see or dream about people's futures. So they essentially will take the blood from someone who's presented to them, drink it, drown themselves in the spring water, and now they can dream about that person's future through omens to see if they have good omens or bad omens. And they call them all the diviners. It's 6 different girls, and so instead of using their names, they've essentially stripped them of their names, and they're calling these girls 1 through 6. So our female main character, Sybil, she actually goes by 6. These girls have to be diviners for 10 years. They do 10 years of service, and as we're reading, our main characters, or most of the diviners, if not all, are on their 9th year of service, so they're only a few months from being released from the cathedral. In walks our male main character, Roderick, but he goes by Rory, thank goodness, who is a knight to the king, and the king does come to get his omens read by the diviners, and that's how our female main character runs into this broody knight. And we really don't know much about the knight just yet, other than the fact that he takes no crap and he means business, but he up and leaves when the king leaves. And I didn't know if I wanted to say this because I wasn't sure if it was a spoiler, but it says it on the cover, so sorry if you don't read the covers, but there's 6 of these girls, 6 diviners, and slowly the diviners start to disappear. So we're gonna follow our female main character, Sybil, or the number 6, to see why these diviners are disappearing. Now, I don't know if I did a good job of explaining all of that to you in a way that would make you want to pick it up. Let's just say I'm soaring through the book, and we'll keep you posted on what we know about the knight moving forward and how it has anything to do with our diviner. Talk to you later. Well, hello there. It is now, what's the date? Girl, get it together. It's Tuesday afternoon. I wanted to give you an update about The Night and the Moth. I am on page 200 or 200 exactly. Wow, I just love when a chapter ends on an even 100 page. That is amazing. I feel like it was on 100 the last time I updated, which means I am just a tiny bit over halfway through this book. I think there are only 380 something pages, 86 pages maybe. So we're just over 50% of the way through. I'm gonna give you my thought. Our female main character, 6, or Sybil, which really, they don't call her by her name very often. They more so call her by 6. She's still trying to figure out why the other diviners are disappearing, and she's had to lean on the knight, Rory. I'm not going to say much about what's going on there, except for it's good. It's really good. I'm really excited for the second half of this book. Another thought is I have shed the dust jacket because, of course, hardcover, it never stays on that long. But what I really liked about this book is the cover and how it has helped me when understanding what's going on in this fantasy world, especially with our female main character. I have not been able to ever visualize. I'm terrible at reading about a plot and visualizing that person for their exact characteristics, but this and this, I'm understanding. As soon as the plot is revealing itself as to what our female main character looks like and what she does and how that's important to what's going on in the story, I can remind myself constantly, so I feel like I have such a great picture of what's going on with 6. So thank you to Rachel Gillig for putting a good descriptor in my head. You know, it can be really hard with fantasy to just visualize exactly what's going on and create this brand new world in your head, especially when you're trying to learn names, characters, themes, all those things. So this is doing a great job of painting a picture. And the last thing that I wanted to give in my halfway update, I've been writing notes about it, is Bartholomew. I had felt like I was left out of some inside joke that every creator or reader who had recommended The Night and the Moth to viewers, to friends, to anyone that was willing to listen to their recommendations, always had a joke about Bartholomew. So every time I was thinking about reading this book, I was like, I have to, because I need to know who Bartholomew, what Bartholomew, Bartholomew who. And I am in on the inside joke, and let's just say it was not what I expected, but it was even better. Yeah, and that's pretty much my halfway update. I have 100 and something more pages to read, and maybe I can catch some reactions. I really don't know how this is going to end. There's a lot already unveiling itself, so I'm excited to see how we finish out the story. So far, it's so good. Catch you probably tomorrow. Bye. I'm just so confused. I'm on page 342, which means I have like 40 or something pages left. And I feel like what we know about what's been happening as they try to solve this problem, there should be a lot more left in the book. And I didn't think, maybe I'm wrong. Is this more than one book? Is this a series? I'll have to go look that up because I didn't think it was a series, but there's no way that this resolves itself in 40 pages. I just can't imagine. I'll keep you updated. So I finished The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I'm gonna put this down because I don't wanna just keep flinging it around as I express my passionate emotions about this book. So here she goes down. If you wanna read The Night and the Moth, don't right now. Wait to read this book until next year because I looked it up. The Night and the Moth is going to be a series. I don't know how many in the series, but we do know at least there's another book coming. And I am just frustrated that I have to wait so long for another book. Last I checked, it's gonna be like the Stonewater Kingdom series. And I think the next book won't even come out for a whole nother year in September of 2026. And the way this book ended, I'm just so sad that I have to wait that long to read the next story. So if you have willpower, put it off and read it at a later time. Which brings me to my star rating. I'm giving this book a 5-star. No notes, absolutely none. You can roll the clips to see my reactions previously of the ending and just the story. I absolutely loved it. Really, 5 stars. So how the story ended, I had picked up on bits and pieces of, you know, maybe certain characters could go certain ways. I just didn't think it would happen in this book. I thought towards the end, I was like, oh, maybe that'll happen, but it'll be down the road if there's another book in the series. I was wrong. After reading this, I definitely don't think One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns was a 4-star for me in the way that I feel like this one is truly a 5-star for me. But hey, there's no going back to that. But it does make me question what dark fantasy is. I think when I was doing my research on this book, it was classified as dark fantasy. Now, I could be totally wrong. If you have a good grasp of what dark fantasy means, like what the dark part of it means, let me know in the comments because I genuinely don't have a good idea of what dark fantasy is. Because if I would have read that The Night and the Moth today and said that it was dark fantasy, I wouldn't have been able to explain to you why. Anyways, that's pretty much my final thoughts on this story, except for Bartholomew. I mean, it was just done. That part of the story was just done so well, so comedic, so enduring. I loved every single part of that. And that leads us to Wednesday afternoon. I am going to take a little bit of a breather, probably, maybe not, and start the second book, maybe before I go to bed tonight, but probably tomorrow on Thursday. Make your final guesses on what book with a moth, having to do with the moth, or having a moth on the cover would be next. And I'll talk to you later. Alright, you've probably seen it or guessed by now. I am reading for the second moth themed book this week, Heartless Hunter, and that is by Kristen. I'm gonna completely guess and say Ciccarelli, Kristen C. Heartless Hunter is by Kristen C. I am just now stopping on chapter 11, which is page 80, 20% of the way through the book. I am reading it on Kindle Unlimited. I didn't have to buy either of my books this week, which is the thrilling. I said I was 80 pages through. I started very little Wednesday night, which was last night. I maybe read 10 pages and then fell asleep. I've mostly read throughout the day today. Thursday evening now, so we've got football tonight, and I do want to go on a little bit of a bike ride, and I saw that Heartless Hunter is included in premium, so I might listen to it on my bike ride. So the most clear cover, I would say, of a moth on the cover is Heartless Hunter. It's one of the prettiest covers I've seen for a fantasy book, which brings me to the genre of this book, which is a romantasy, but young adult. And I do try to shy away from young adult. So far, so good. It's not feeling too young for me. And Heartless Hunter is book 1 in a 2-book series, I think. I don't know if there's going to be more than 2 books. I think the second book is called Rebel Witch, and it is in the Crimson Moth series. So what is this book about? We are basically post-revolution, and this is a society that does not like witches. If you are a witch, you're likely killed. If you are a family of a witch that didn't turn that witch in, you're also killed. They are eradicating witches and all things about witches. Which, oh my god. Our female main character, her name is Rune, and Rune is a witch, but she's an undercover witch. So she is actually the Crimson Moth, who is essentially a leader who helps other witches get out of this town, escape, and she goes undercover to help witches who have been found, bring them back, let them escape, and her incognito figure that everyone else knows her by is the Crimson Moth, but she plays in her everyday life like she hates witches, she's not a witch sympathizer, she's not a witch herself, and she has to keep up that charade. Which brings us to our male main character, and this is dual point of view, so we are getting a point of view of both Rune and MMC, which is Gideon Sharp. Gideon did not grow up in a family of wealth, unlike Rune, and he is, of course, a witch hunter. They are both using each other, and this isn't a spoiler, it's on the back of the book. She is using him to get more intellect, and he is using her to see if she's the Crimson Moth, or to see if he can narrow her out as the Crimson Moth. And I think that's just about all of the plot I'm gonna let you in on, which is all the plot summary that's on the back of the book, or the Kindle summary. So far, so good. I'll keep you posted, and I am going to go on a bike ride before dinner tonight. So talk to you later. It is Thursday. No, it's Friday. I am losing my mind, but thank goodness it's Friday. It's later in the evening on Friday, and I am ready to just sit back and keep reading. I'm just under 200 pages of Heartless Hunter by Kristen C, which means I still have a little bit more than 50% of the book left, because I think it's like 400 something pages. And I just can't stop thinking about I'm just chronically online. This book is clearly about a witch and a witch hunter. Every time they say witch, I'm just thinking about all the TikToks and the sounds where it's like, witch! I can't not read it that way in my head. One of the things that I think is really cool is the portrayal of moths in this story. There's a lot of symbolism with moths, as we've seen in the last book and this book, but of course with this one in particular, she is called the Crimson Moth, and something about her witchy powers that they're trying to figure out who she is whenever she casts a spell or does magic and that spell or magic wears off, it leaves behind like floating red moths, and I think that's just such a cool imagery. And don't want to spoil too much about what's going on. Just in this cat and mouse game, they're both still using each other, curious how it's going to blow up, and we still have a lot to learn about our male main character Gideon. There's a lot of background and history with him, his family, and maybe his past lovers that we don't know that I'm sure are going to be really important to the story. And the last thing I'm going to do is I remembered that I have my Kindle case that I'm going to change. I felt like this one is my favorite stickers ever, but I wanted to change it up to be a little bit more fall, a little bit more fantasy. And I did buy a Kindle case a few months ago that I'm really excited to use and put on. So I'm going to show that to you now. I think it's a good time. I think I have the Kindle Paperwhite 11 or something like that. And funny story, when I first got this, I was just not thinking straight, clearly. And I didn't buy a case for it, and I put the pop socket right on the back of the actual Kindle. And I could never get the residue spot off. I like Goo Gone it, and it's not sticky at all, but it left a circle on my Kindle. So when I did buy a case, I put it right where the circle was, so I just forgot all about it. And so every time I take the case off, I'm like, man, functionality's still great. So we're going for something a little bit different. This is my next Kindle case. It's these castles. I think it's very fall, very fantasy, very whimsical, which is what I want to be reading over the next few weeks. I got this from Lash Next Door, which if you know the YouTubers Brooklyn and Bailey, this is their company and off their site. Really like this case. One thing that I don't have from my other case that I enjoy about this one is the auto close on and off. I really like that. And then of course this also has the little strap at the back, so if you want to hold it like this you can. And then it has a stand as well. I'll be honest, I've never used the stand, but maybe I will. And now I think we're ready to go to finish this book up. With it being Friday, I really hope to have this done by tomorrow. I will say I'm getting through it pretty slowly, which I don't want to say is negative about the book. I am just kind of coming off a high from The Night and the Moth that this one isn't living up to what that one did, but that's not fair. So, and I know people rave about this one, so I'm just going to keep digging and give it its best shot. I think for the rest of the night, I might listen to it some on Spotify Premium while I do some coloring. Join me. Another clip, another cat. I am about 70% of the way through the book, and I think that one of these characters is hiding something, and I'm picking up on it, which I never do, so I'm probably wrong. But a lot of these characters are shady. Yeah? Oh, hello. I have finished Heartless Hunter, as you can see, red baby, by Kristen C. I finished it on my Kindle yesterday. I was reading all throughout yesterday, which was Saturday in the morning. Then we went shopping because we have a wedding coming up and we had to get some stuff. Then we came home and I read and read and read and read until I finished it. And then I started editing this video last night. So you're actually going to see this video post today, which is Sunday. But I remembered that I didn't give my final thoughts on Heartless Hunter. I am going to be rating Heartless Hunter a 3.5 star, which when I went into Fable and put that rating, I was actually so surprised because so many of you have rated it well above a 4 and then a 5 star. And so sometimes I can feel a little bit of guilt when I am not one of those people, but I wanted to give an honest reaction to the story. 3.5 star is a really good rating still. I feel like that is just right at my average rating for books these days, and I think that's also a really good rating for me personally with a young adult fantasy. Now, the reason I gave it a 3.5 star is because I enjoyed the fantasy building, the world building, the politics. However, I did think that the original message, the original motivations of our main character, I feel like we kind of lost them in the sauce towards the end of the book, the last 50%. Eventually you get back to it, but not really at the end. But I did love the twists, the turns, the plot twists in the story. And I did love the idea of the romances in this. However, they fell short for me. And that's why I couldn't give it a 4, 4.5, or 5 star. I think in the end, for the trope of this book, I need to read more of this trope because I just can't understand how this trope would work. I just don't understand how the main characters in a part of this type of trope would eventually fall for one another. Let me know if you like this trope and if you can get behind what's going on in this type of trope. And I'm being very vague, sorry. They had such short chapters, which is the only reason I kept pushing and kept pushing. The short chapters were amazing. Young adult, you know. And how the book ended, it definitely leads you to want to read the second book, which is Rebel Witch, and I certainly will, and I am still excited for it. That's pretty much it. Let me know if there are any Moth core books out there in the fantasy world that I missed that you're like, you have to read this one next time. That's all. Bye for now.